5 American workshop presenters. I wish you a successful and productive conference, and I would like to invite the founder of this conference, Ms. Natella Doronese. Natella, the online stage is yours.
Hello, dear friends. I'm so glad that this morning you are all here. This is already the 12th and each year we achieve some new success, and this is already the 3rd online IRCEELT conference. And I want to thank everybody who helped to organize the conference. Not only the team of the conference, but all people involved who helped us. I want to thank all teachers and researchers who are attending. Because I believe that it is very important in these hard days of pandemic and not very peaceful situation and so on, that we teachers and we researchers keep on, and that we are resilient to all difficulties, because if not us, then who will motivate our students and who will provide that humankind not simply physically survives, but goes on to be educated and cultural, which I think is very, very important. Thank you very much once more for your loyalty, especially those of you for whom it's not the first conference for which you attend. And I welcome very much the new attendants, and I hope that they will, if not participate next year, but at least spread the word of mouth, because this is the best advertisement for anything, including conferences. And you tell people how useful this conference is and invite them to next participation. And especially, I hope that next time we will meet face to face. Welcome, and thank you for participating. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, Ms. Natella. Hopefully we will meet each other next year in a face-to-face setting. Fingers crossed. Thank you. And the next presenter, I would like to welcome the Rector of International Black Sea University, Dr. Safet Bayraktutan. Please.
Thank you very much, Eka. Thank you, Professor Natella. Dear distinguished guests, dear professors, dear teachers, dear conference participants, this is my pleasure to welcome all of you to today's event. And I would like to say special thank all of you because of your enthusiasm and support. The world almost completely defeat the virus, and I hope we will have a chance to organize IRCEELT conference, next IRCEELT conference here in Tbilisi, and meet each others without masks. Education and research is that what we International Black Sea University are dedicated to. We do understand modern trends in global and regional politics, economics, culture, and society, and of course, education. Among these trends, the most valuable ones are wider democracy, more emphasis and social needs, more inclusion and more participation of the society in the decision-making directly affecting them. The current situation in the region vividly showed the urgency and actuality of these issues. To achieve what has been mentioned above, strong systems of education can play a pivotal role. Thus, the role of education cannot be overestimated in the modern knowledge-based society. It's not a novelty if I say that majority of modern leading states managed to build their statehood to the moment they succeed in the formation of efficient systems of education. Today, Georgia is facing the same crucial moment as it is on its way to improving or building a modern democratic state. And the Georgian universities have to assume the responsibility to support the state in its effort. We are among top Georgian universities, and this is because of the quality of the teaching and learning, our efforts to support students and academic staff in academic initiatives, our attempts to support students' employment, and of course, our interest to supporting academic freedom and research. I would like to show all my respects once again to all the conference participants of the 12th International Research Conference on Education, Language and Literature. Wish you all success with the conference and your personal and professional life as well. Stay healthy, good luck. Thank you for this opportunity again.
Thank you very much. Let me introduce the Dean of the Faculty of Social Sciences, Humanities and Education, Professor Dr. Tamar Shioshvili. Ms. Tamar, please.
Hello, I want to extend my cordial welcome to our participants, to our honorable guests. I'm so glad that this conference has turned into a traditional conference, and we have not skipped the year, you know. I want to thank especially Professor Natella Dogonadze, Eka, Pipia, Maya Chkotua. They are very energetically participating in the organizing of this conference. And despite all the difficulties that we face and that are around us these days, last year, for example, we still have a lot of participants. When I looked through the conference, I identified very familiar, names, as well as new names. And we have participants from many foreign countries. And this is very, very pleasing. And I met the name of Professor Raup, our dearest friend in the program, then Kevin Hershey, our former English language fellow, and I cannot say that he's former friend. He still participates in every activity and event. I'm so glad that he's not saying goodbye to us, and he's everywhere. I'm very glad that we have very interesting topics, diverse topics, and there are some topics connected with the COVID pandemic, then the effects of COVID pandemic, distance learning, online learning. So new topics have emerged. Unfortunately, we have to face the reality. So I'm very glad that we have this kind of very nice organization and participation from our friends, and they are not lazy to write the articles, to take part, and to dedicate their precious time to us. Thank you once again, and I wish you fruitful participation. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Tamara. I would like to invite the guest from U.S. Embassy to Georgia, Cultural Attaché, Mr. Christopher Anderson. Thank you for being here.
Great. Thank you so much for inviting me today. This is a great conference. Obviously, as a diplomat, I firmly believe in the importance of intercultural dialogue and connections, but language learning, literature, and education are the bedrock for allowing that to happen. And I just want to mention one little story from my own background that I think highlights the importance of good language teaching and learning. When I was in high school and I studied French, I found it to be such a miserable, horrible experience that I was convinced I could never learn another language again. And I almost didn't join the State Department because I was afraid of learning languages because the process was so miserable in high school. And then I joined the State Department, and I have since studied three languages, including Georgian. And it is, it's been eye-opening that the main difference is in how you teach. And it makes a huge difference how you teach language. I have met people that have learned English just by listening to ABBA songs. So, it is possible, but the reality is good language teaching and engaging teaching really makes a difference. And it really does open up the world to people if you can do it well. And I just want to say that this is our 30th year of diplomatic relations with Georgia. And in that time, the US has spent a lot of time and effort into promoting English language teaching and strengthening universities. And we now have a network of about 30 different sites across Georgia where we teach English language with our partner PH and others. And this has made a huge difference. We do believe that it opens up Georgia to the rest of the world and helps Georgia restore its place as part of the European family. So thank you all. I know education has been a very tough field the last couple of years with all the transition and all the with all the virtual requirements, but I want to salute all of you for the great work you do and just reiterate the support from the U.S. Embassy for this initiative. So thank you so much, and I wish you all the best during this conference.
By the way, I want to add something. We witnessed Christopher's wonderful Georgian speech at the opening of Jazz Festival. His Georgian is perfect. So congratulations, Christopher.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome the next guest, Dr. Manana Rusaishvili, President of English Teachers Association of Georgia, Head of English Philology at Ivana Javachishvili Tbilisi State University. Ms. Manana, please.
Eka, thank you for inviting me and for giving me this beautiful opportunity to greet you and IPSU, our staff, as well as participants of the conference. So it is the 12th annual conference this year. Time flies so fast because I was either part of the commission or committee or just a participant of the conference every time. And as president of ETAG, English Teachers Association of Georgia, several times we partnered to this conference together with other partners. And each year, as I see from the development of the topics presented or papers presented at the conference, each year brings new challenges, and each year more and more people take part in the conference, not only from Georgia locally, but all over the world. And as well as this, the topics presented are also becoming diverse, and a lot of new issues emerge that need to be solved in the field of ELT and literature and language. The conferences organized by IPSU are always loaded with interesting content, and I'm sure that this conference will not be an exception. On behalf of ETAG, as I am president of ETAG, and I know Ms. Ruslan Dramaladze is one of the people who is also going to address the participants of the conference. She will also talk about on behalf of on behalf of ETAG, and as well as on behalf of TSU, as I am head of the English Philology at Tbilisi State University. I would like to greet the conference guests and the participants and wish you all very productive days at the conference. I'm sure that this conference is also loaded with very interesting and I would say scorching problems regarding English language teaching, as well as general linguistics issues and literature. Once again, I thank you to the organizers of this conference for giving me this wonderful opportunity to greet you all. So wish you success.
Thank you, Ms. Manana, always being with us. Thank you for that. Let me introduce another guest, Mr. Lasha Margishvili, Deputy Director of National Center for Education Quality Enhancement in Tbilisi. Lasha, please.
Thank you, Eka. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, everyone, dear colleagues. I would like to welcome you on behalf of National Center of Quality Enhancement. I would like also welcome the participants of the conference, eminent speakers, and organizers of the conference, International Black University. We would be much happier if we could welcome you in Georgia in person, but we are hopeful that we can have the opportunity to do this after the pandemic period will finish. I'm delighted to take floor on behalf of the National Center, as I have mentioned, to express our gratitude to the organizers, to the International Black University participants and speakers, for your commitment and intensive work that you have carried out to bring the conference to the current stage. As you know, the National Center for Quality Enhancement is the only agency in Georgia. We work to ensure and enhance the relevance and quality of general, vocational, and higher education. And for this, we are committed to support higher education institutions in developing institutional strategies and policies for teaching and learning. We also support opportunities to stimulate and promote innovative teaching and learning practices in different study fields, of course, including education, languages, and literature. Also, it's worth mentioning that 2022 is a year of the cluster accreditation of humanities, and I do hope that the academic staff from the different Georgian universities will gain knowledge that will have an important impact in the process of development and improvement academic programs for cluster accreditation. I sincerely hope that together we will be able to achieve the outcomes of the conference, and the success will be attributed to all of us. I wish you all fruitful work and much success in this conference, and good luck, and thank you for your attention. Thank you once again for inviting the National Agency to participate in this session. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I would like to welcome the person that you know well, one of the, let's say, the founders of the conference, and you've seen his photo in the previous session, the one who organized the most interesting parts in the conference, but I have to introduce him as the head of higher education quality assurance department from National Center for Educational Quality Enhancement in Georgia, Mr. Nicholas Parjanadze.
Thank you, Eka. Let me use this opportunity and greet all of the distinguished guests and conference participants, and of course, conference organizers, all my dearest friends and colleagues, and I'm glad that this year again we successfully managed to organize this conference, this time without my engagement. But once again, I'm impressed with the way the process was organized. So thank you, Eka and Professor Natela Dokonadze for organizing this conference. And once again, I would like to use this opportunity and to thank the US Embassy for support of the university and this particular conference, and each individual person I see here in the audience, that a lot of people who benefited from the US Embassy and State Department programs, including myself. I was lucky to be a Fulbright scholar, and I also participated in teacher leadership programs. And these are actually excellent opportunities for professional development, for enhancing quality of teaching and learning here in Georgia. So thank you for this opportunity. And of course, I would like to mention ITAG, a very functional, friendly, collegial, and highly professional institution. I've been a member of this organization for many years, and Kalvatoni Manana and Kalvatoni Lusiko are here, and I owe these people a lot in terms of my professional development. Of course, I would like to mention PH International, again, very efficient institution, and we've been doing a lot of educational projects together, and thank you for this opportunity. And of course, I would like to thank my boss here, Lasha Mardishvili. And of course, I would like to thank the National Center for Educational Quality Enhancement, because many of you know that, again, this is a very functional and very supportive institution taking care of quality of teaching and learning. And it's a very open institution, attracting and inviting higher educational institutions to participate in all these procedures to make a better sense of all educational policies and initiatives. And our participation again here today in this conference is a good sign of this support and cooperation. And I don't want to bother you, but lastly, I really want to once again formally and officially say hello to Kevin Hershey, our former English language fellow. We've been communicating for so many years now, and we have this professional partnership and cooperation, and thanks to him, we in this case, International Black Sea University established good connections with Northern Arizona University, benefiting a lot from this meaningful cooperation. Once again, I would like to greet all of you and wish you a successful conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Your contribution is valuable to us. I would like to invite another guest, Dr. Rusudan Dremaladze, ITAG co-founder and director, head of the Foreign Languages Group at International Examination and Assessment Center here in Tbilisi. Ms. Rusika, please.
Thank you again. Thank you all the organizers of the conference. Great job. You know, this has become such a regular conference that if it does not happen, we will miss it. So thank you very much, all Natella, everybody who has been involved in this wonderful conference. You know, this year I look at this from different viewpoints. The thing is that today the world has very hard times. It's a turbulent world. And here we are English teachers to contribute a bit to the peace and the better communication between the people. And English is a very, very important, knowledge of English is a very important part of it. Last year and the year before we had, and you actually had, lots of Ukrainian participants in the conference. They used to come and participate and present excellent colleagues of ours. This year is a kind of dramatic year for everybody. And here I want to take this opportunity and say, and welcome my virtual, so to say, Ukrainian colleagues and wish them happiness and peace. And I'm sure that a better knowledge of English will help to establish peace. And as I said, better communication between different nations. Well, this is all I wanted to say. Thank you very much for inviting me. And I wish the conference a success. You are real heroes here, guys. And I'm very much happy to welcome Edward and Kevin, my old friends and everybody, my colleagues sitting here. ITAG unites, our association unites, and it unites people of different nationalities, age, different interests. And I'm happy really that I am I did a bit of contribution to its development. It covers the country and unites you all and more hundreds of teachers in far away villages, mountainous regions, in small towns. You know, it's an umbrella for all of us. So thank you for giving me this opportunity, and I wish you peace and successful conference.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank
Resident,
you.
for being with us always. Your contribution is valuable. Thank you once again. And I would like to welcome Ms. Nana Yosedani, Director of English Language Programs at PH International, Georgia. Nana, please.
Thank you so much, Eka. Good morning, dear participants and guests, ladies and gentlemen. As Eka has mentioned, I'm here on behalf of PH International, an American organization that counts over 35 years of working toward building stronger global communities by fostering civic education, cross-cultural learning, and increased opportunities in a digital age. Representing such an organization, for me, it is an utmost privilege to have this opportunity to share, discuss, and research together with like-minded people united under common goals and objectives. So thank you so much, International Black Sea University. Although PH International has had some short-term interactions with IPSU in the past, it wasn't until, let's say, 3 years ago that our close partnership started under the U.S. Embassy funded Civic and Tech through English Language Program, CETL for short, that focuses on content-based language learning and also integrated teaching and learning methodologies. CETL is an extensive course that consists of 7 full-day training modules and 7 classroom observations stretched over a full school year, and is all about teaching the civics, English language, and ICT teachers how to work together and merge the contents of civic education, English language, and ICT in a lesson. Throw in training a student teacher in all this, as if this whole thing isn't complicated enough on its own, and you will have an idea about what we've been through together with the International Black Sea University throughout the past 3 years under CETL. Last year, we launched a follow-on project to CETL, which implies taking 24 high-performing civics, English, and ICT teachers to the United States for a 2-week-long study tour. And our own and precious Ekaterina Pipia of IPSU was indispensable there too. So in about 10 days, we're going to travel to the States together with 24 distinguished teachers to explore more about integrated teaching and learning. And our dearest host, Bill Rich of the Red House Learning, that will be presenting here later today, will be helping us to make this experience as fulfilling and multifaceted as possible. Throughout this partnership with IPSU, we have observed a team of professionals that never stop surprising us because of their enthusiasm and hard work and goal-driven attitude. I have to say, we often stop and realize how fortunate we are to have such a consistent partner, especially in today's world where the only constant is change, and this increasing degrees of separation as opposed to unity has become ordinary and, usual order of things. Because of all the above said, I'm not the least surprised that the IPSU team came through again and once again offered this wonderful opportunity to reconnect to the whole educational community. I like to say that we've gone through fire and ice together over the past couple of years. This time I would add winds and storms. And even if I know that there are more storms ahead, I really look forward to more adventures and experiences with this wonderful team of professionals that I'm so proud to call our partners. To conclude, I would like to thank the organizers and the funders of the event and wish you happy conferencing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nana, for your precious words. Thank you all for making this conference happen. Thanks to your contribution, networking, US Embassy here in Georgia, PH International. So I said at the beginning of the conference, as being the partner of the programs with you, helped us to have 4 keynote speakers from the United States and 5 workshop presenters, again, from the United States of America. And the best and vivid example will be the first keynote speaker that you will be listening now, Miss Lottie Baker, who is the Regional English Language Officer from the United States of America. Her keynote will be about beyond the 4 skills, language education as peace education. Miss Lottie.
Hey, thank you. Thank you, Eka. Is it possible for me to share my screen so I can show a PowerPoint?
Yes, in a second.
Let's see. Let me make sure I can do it. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. Let's see. I think it's, here we go.
Okay.
Share. Okay. Can you see my PowerPoint? Do you see this? Yes. Okay. I see thumbs up. Okay. Okay. Good. And let me get this up. Okay. Thank you. I have all these Zoom screens. Even though we've been doing online education for now 2 years, I still, it still takes me a minute to get my Zoom screen set up. So again, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. As Eka said, my name is Lottie Baker. I am the Regional English Language Officer, or we call it RELO. It's an office in the US embassies. And I'm usually based in Kyiv, Ukraine, but Georgia is one of my countries, one of the countries that I work with. So has anyone heard of our office, RELO, Regional English Language Office? You can maybe put like a thumbs up or raise, yeah, thumbs up. Okay, so some people, Eka has, some people have, maybe some people have, and they're just not putting their thumbs up, but maybe it's new to a lot of you. So that's great. Because what I'm going to do today is share with you first a little bit about our office, the RELO office, what we do, and some of the resources that we have for you as teachers. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about how language education can be a means for peace education. And I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by that. So first, as I said, I work with the US government, and sometimes when I describe where I work, I get a confused look from people. They don't often associate the United States government and embassies with English language teachers and learners. So I want you to think and write in the chat box, why do you think that the US government, why do you think the US government even cares about English teachers around the world? And you see those 2 dialogue bubbles. That means that I want you to write in the chat box. So what are some ideas? Why do you think that we even have this RELO office? So I'll give you a couple seconds to write something. Why do you think the US government has an interest in helping with English language teachers and English language learners in different countries like Georgia? Great, so now I see some, so to make the world better, spreading English for diplomacy and democracy, to encourage cross-cultural communication, language competencies to provide access to more information. That's a good one, providing access. English provides access to many things. Globalization is important, to promote English as a tool for international communication. Great. So even though some of you may not know what an English language, what the Regional English Language Office is, I can see that you have some ideas about why we exist. What's this one? U.S. Embassy has supported English language teaching and learning in Georgia for many years. Yes, mutual understanding. Exactly. So it sounds like you have some ideas already. The U.S. recognizes that for better or for worse, English is what we call the lingua franca. So lingua franca is the common language that people who don't speak the same language use to communicate with each other. And around the world, it's often the lingua franca. And so my position is part of the public affairs section, and this focuses on reaching out to the community, and it contributes to our broader mission, as I think Ed mentions, to enhance mutual understanding. So between people in the US and people around the world. So for instance, if Georgians speak English, they can understand America and Americans better. And then more importantly, Americans can understand Georgians better. And then plus we know, as some of you mentioned too, that in the world that we live in today, English proficiency is often a necessity for economic advancement, upward mobility, and engagement in global business. And we want to support Georgians to engage in those activities. So by supporting English learning around the world, we open these doors for individuals who may not otherwise have opportunities to interact with Americans. So that's a little bit about what we do in a big, broad picture. We have regional English language offices, RELOs, around the globe. There are 26 of them, in fact, and each office covers or works with several different countries, or most of them do. So if you're not sure which one, many of you I think are from Georgia. So the regional English language office that works with you is our office, which is usually based in Ukraine. But if I know this is an international conference and some of you may be from other places. So if you're wondering which RELO office covers your area, here's a website, and I can send these slides and these links at a later time too. But you can find a link to an email address where you can contact the RELO near you. So as I mentioned, I am working in the embassy Kyiv, which means I'm temporarily working outside of Ukraine. You can see from this image, there are several other RELO offices in the Europe region. And so the word regional in our name means that we work with several or multiple countries in a region. So in our case, you can see the yellow is the RELO Kyiv region. So we work with Ukraine, Moldova, and the Caucasus countries, Armenia, Azerbaijan, and of course, Georgia. And so here in Georgia, you may have worked with Lika and of course with Chris at the embassy in Tbilisi. So all of our RELO offices, we support English language through several programs. I want to briefly just outline a few of our main programs for your awareness. And then if any of these programs seem like something that you would like to learn more about in Georgia or in your country, you can go to the public affairs section of your US Embassy or contact your RELO. And if you're in one of these countries, your RELO is me. So first, one program that we have is the English Language Fellow and Specialist Program. And I think Kyla is an English Language Fellow who is actually joining us during this conference. And I think we have another former English Language Fellow. So Georgia has great experience with fellows. But for those of you who are not familiar with this program, these are highly qualified American English language teaching professionals. All of them have master's degrees related to education. In some cases, they have PhDs. These professionals come to the host country, so to Georgia, for instance, to teach in universities, to provide teacher training or support with special projects, such as curriculum development and textbook writing. And then we also have specialists. It's a very similar kind of program where Americans come to different countries to provide English language teaching support. But specialists are usually short-term projects, and they're usually focused on specific projects because they're short-term. They're not usually tied to an academic year. So some of you here who work at a university, many of you have interacted with fellows or specialists, but some of you may be thinking, oh, this is something my university might benefit from. So it's something to think about. And then I'll say really quickly that since the pandemic, since it's already been 2 years, we've shifted to virtual fellows. So we've had fellows work in a virtual setting, and we've had great success with that. In fact, such great success that we're going to continue this program So that's another option, is that there might be, you might have a need for a virtual educator, someone to work, to lead meetings on Zoom like this, or to lead virtual classes. And that's something else that fellows and specialists can support. A second program I want to share very briefly is what we call the English Access Micro Scholarship Program. It's a 2-year English program, and this is geared for or focused on local youth from disadvantaged backgrounds. And so the thing that's great about this program is that these students, they don't only learn English, but they also learn about American culture, about American values. They have technology activities, they go on field trips. And they also sometimes experience intensive sessions, as we call like access camps sometimes. And then we try to invite American visitors to these programs as much as possible, so that, again, students can interact with Americans and Americans can interact with youth from other countries. So you can see here on the slide that we have access programs in over 80 countries since 2004. And we have a particularly large program here in Georgia with about 25 different access sites. And so let's see, the third program I want to share that might be of interest to you is our online professional development programs. So we have a robust online program with MOOCs, so massive open online courses. So these are on Canvas, and these MOOCs, they're free. You don't have to pay anything. And they're focused on topics related to English language teaching. So for instance, I know Nana was just talking about content-based learning. We have a course on content-based teaching is an example. We have some courses on teaching academic writing. So these are MOOCs that we offer. And then we also have these open courses. In the past, they were called e-teacher. So some of you may be familiar with that term, e-teacher. And these are ones that are more, they're smaller, and they have a facilitator and a professor from the United States. And so these are ones that, again, they're still free, but they require an application process through the embassy. So if that is something you're interested in, I encourage you to again connect with you can connect with me, the Relo, and I can connect you with the right person. But every quarter we have new groups of teachers to participate in these open courses, and I can help you learn about the process to apply for them. And then lastly, our office has a range of resources that you can access anytime. We have live webinars. These are held bi-weekly or by every 2 weeks. So usually every 2 weeks, and they're topics about English language teaching. And the great thing I think about these webinars is that they're archived on our website. So if you can't attend one, it's okay. You can just go to the archive and you can watch these webinars, I think from many, many years in the past. So this is another thing to look out for, is our webinars. The forum, this is our quarterly journal for English teachers. Many of these articles are written by teachers around the world. Whenever I talk about forum, I really emphasize that you also, as a teacher or professor, you might have an idea, you might have an idea for an article, and forum might be a good place for you to publish that. So if you're thinking about publishing or an article about teaching, I would really encourage you to look into Forum magazine. Again, just like the webinars, these are archived on our website, so you can access them for free. And you can read articles from the past, I think from the past 20 years. You see that we just celebrated the 60th anniversary of Forum. So that we've had this magazine or this journal since 60 years, but I think the last 20 years are archived on the online. And this QR code, if you use this QR code, I think it should give you access to all of these articles. But if not, again, I can connect you with some of these resources afterwards, or if you go to our American English at state.gov website, you can find this forum magazine. And then this is final page about we have so many resources. Again, just kind of to summarize some of our resources, we have I think it's okay. This I think was supposed to come up as like an animation so you can see each one, but I'll just explain them to you. We have our website, the American English .state.gov. We have a Facebook page for American English for Educators. So if you're on Facebook, you can just type that in and search American English for Educators. And then we have a YouTube site. And again, the YouTube site has these recordings of the webinars, and they also have recordings of other shorter, for instance, like English language teaching tips. So I encourage you to look into that. And I see like people are typing in the chat, and it's great to see that many of you have participated in open courses. That's wonderful. One of the things that's great about Open is that we now have a community of practice for alumni. So people who have completed the Open courses, and you can interact with other teachers from around the world who are also, who've also completed these courses. So I think that's a great, great way to connect with others. And so with that, I want to spend the second part of this talk talking a little bit about English language teaching. And so today, specifically, I want to talk about how English language teaching can be a means for teaching for peace. It's been on my mind a lot recently with the state of the world today. And I'm sure many of you as well have been thinking of how we can live in a more peaceful world than we do right now. So first, I want to step back and think about language education. And I often like to argue that or suggest that language teachers are powerful. And I think that language teachers are more powerful than teachers of other academic disciplines, so such as biology or history or algebra. So some teachers disagree with me, like biology teachers, they often disagree. But I know I'm here with fellow language teachers, so I'm in good company, so to speak. So language education, I believe in, language education and language teachers are special. They're more powerful. And it's because language is not a body of knowledge like some of these other disciplines. Language is a skill. It is something we do. It is a vehicle through which we use to communicate. So if we are teaching communicatively, if we are teaching students how to use language, how to read, listen, speak, and write in a language, then we're not teaching about the language, we're teaching about other things. We're teaching about topics. And so therefore, we language teachers, we can cover many different topics in the classroom. We are not limited to a certain historical time or a mathematical function. We can help our students learn English about all sorts of different ideas. And then we help our students to learn English to do things or functions, because we get things done with language. And so by that, I mean, language helps us make requests, argue for a point of view, connect with other people, to make rules, to start arguments and to start wars, and then also to make peace. And so it's up to us as language teachers to decide what we want to teach our students to do with language and what they communicate about. And I think that's why it gives us considerable power. And I mean, I'm biased as a language teacher myself, but I think that makes us more powerful and more special than other teachers. So again, so this brings me to the topic of peace. And peace education. So I want to just to think about, again, take a step back. I am going to share with you some practical ideas for incorporating peace education and teaching. But first, I want to just think about peace, like what that is. So can you type in the chat box? Again, you see that little icon. type in the chat box, what is one word or image that comes to mind, that you think about when you hear this word peace? So can you, like a word or an image, maybe an event, maybe it's a phrase. Okay, so I see no war, harmony, agreeing, mutual understanding, celebrations, festivals, freedom, love, respect. These are great words. I like thinking of these words. Like when I read these words and when I think of them, they make me feel good. We sometimes in English have this phrase, can feel good, like feel good topics. And I think, oh, peace is such a feel good topic. I like thinking about this. Empathy, kindness matters. Conferences. Oh, I like that. Conferences. Right? Because conferences, what is a conference? It's gathering people from different places to talk about different topics, coming together. Great. So I have been thinking, oh, smiles and laughter, I like it. I have been thinking a lot about the role that we as language educators can play in promoting peace. And I think, as I said, because of what I was saying about language education, that we can talk about whatever we want to, more or less, in a language class, I think we can think about, well, how can we help our students be the peacemakers of the future? And so in myself, when I was thinking about what comes to mind and when I thought of peace, I thought of some symbols. And so maybe some of you thought of these symbols too. So this one right here, have you all seen this symbol? So this is a peace sign. And I think this is almost universal. It's a symbol for peace. And so I was thinking this week, I was like, where did we come up with this? What does this symbol mean? And so I looked it up. I did a little bit of light research, and I learned that the symbol for peace is actually a V. And it was used in World War II as a symbol for victory. So here's a picture of Winston Churchill. He's showing that V for victory. And when it was first used, it wasn't first used by Winston Churchill, but first used by someone else, another leader in World War II. And they used it in 1940. So this is in the middle of the fighting. The battles are still occurring. And they show this V symbol and they say, we are going to be victorious soon. We are going to have a military action. We are going to have a battle, and then we will be victorious. And then they show this V. And this V is what we now think of as peace. So just something to think about, that this symbol started as a way to signify that we are going to win the next battle, the next military battle. Another symbol for peace I thought about was this. Has anyone seen this kind of symbol before? It's an olive branch. And then again, I thought, where does this come from? After learning about a V, that the V stands for victory, I started wondering, well, where do these other symbols come from? Well, this olive branch, it originated in ancient Greece, and it originated with Athena. Does anyone know? Athena is the goddess of something. Anyone know what Athena is the goddess of? Athena is the goddess of war. And here's a statue of her with a spear and a shield. And what I learned is that the reason that the olive branch stands for peace is because Athena threw her spear in the ground in a battle, and then it blossomed into an olive tree later. And then these olive trees were a memory of how Athena fought Poseidon in this war to win a battle. So I just say this to think, to keep you thinking. Another thing I started doing when I was thinking about peace was thinking about peacemakers and what are peacemakers and who are peacemakers. And in the United States, as I mentioned, I used to be a teacher. I taught language, I taught English, and we used to teach about peacemakers. And one person we taught about all the time was Martin Luther King. Here's a photo. He stood for nonviolence and civil disobedience in the United States in the 1960s when there's great racial inequity. So many of you know. And then we also sometimes teach about Gandhi. I think many of you probably know about Gandhi and teach about Gandhi as well as a peacemaker. Mother Teresa is one that I used to teach with my students. And then interestingly, I was talking to a friend about these peacemakers, and he said, well, you know what also is a peacemaker? And he showed me this, and he said, this is a gun. This is a gun made by Colt, the company that manufactured the gun. And they called this gun the Peacemaker. And it was made in the United States in the 1870s for government officials. And the idea is that they needed this gun to keep the peace. And so it's not exactly the same idea as Martin Luther King. And it's definitely not something that I taught my students when talking about peace. And then one last image I'm going to share with you is, again, thinking about peacemakers. I was like, well, what about a peacekeeper? And we think we have UN peacekeepers. And again, we see images with people ready to go to battle with guns, ready to fight. And again, this isn't exactly the first thing that comes to mind when I think of peace, because I think of the words that you mentioned, harmony and working together and collaboration and laughter and empathy. And this is what I taught my students when I talked about peace. So bringing this back to education, why am I talking about all of these ironic symbols and images of peace? It's not happy. And as I said, these are not images that I taught my students when I talked about peace. And I don't think necessarily that you should talk to your students that peace is a gun, not at all. In fact, the opposite. I think we need to dig deeper about what is behind peace. And this is the critical thinking. I think someone wrote that in the chat. So we often focus on these feel-good aspects of peace. What happened, the love and the laughter, but what happened to get there? And this is the hard part. And so far, when I look at the history and the current events, it's not great. We don't have a great we don't have a great ways to make peace all the time. And so I think that's what gives us opportunity as teachers to work with the next generation, to work with students, to think hard about how can we move past some of these misunderstandings, uncomfortable conversations in a way that does not involve violence, that does not involve war. And it appears, based on our current events and based on the history of our world so far, that this is difficult for us to do. And so then I want to kind of move over to what we can do in the classroom. And again, I think this is difficult. It's difficult for me when watching about what's going on in the world. It's very easy to feel helpless. But I think we have to think, well, what can we do when we're working with our students? How can we help them become better peacemakers than what we have, what has happened in the world today? So I did a little bit of light research, looked around, and I figured, well, peace education, this is actually a discipline, like language education. So peace education is a field in itself. And there are different definitions for what peace education is. Here are some phrases that I pulled out. So we have conflict resolution, listening, reflection, cooperation, human rights, dialogue-based interaction, analysis of multiple perspectives of historical narratives, learning about peacemakers. And so in thinking about looking at these definitions, I was thinking, again, back to my point about language is powerful. Like, we can talk about whatever we want in our English class, kind of. Maybe we can incorporate some of these things, these topics, in teaching. So I'm going to share with you briefly 3 ways that you can incorporate peace or peace education in language teaching. And in doing so, I'm going to try to highlight a few of these resources on the website that I shared with you, with all of our resources. So these are all, these resources, these aren't my ideas. I'm not that creative. These are ideas that I found, or I found and adapted from others. And these are also on our American English websites. So this first one is a lesson plan idea about peace words, helping students build vocabulary for to talk about peace. This vocabulary building piece it's an important first step, I think, in any unit, because we want to make sure our students have those linguistic tools right? The vocabulary, the language structures to be able to talk with each other about these topics. So this comes from an e-journal, and this is actually one that was published a while ago, but we have it archived on our website. So in this e-journal, it has like 12 different lesson plans about peace education for language teachers. And so this is one of the lesson plans that it mentioned. I'm just summarizing. This isn't exactly, it gives many more details if you read the actual e-journal, but in general, the idea is that you ask students, kind of like what we just did, what does peace mean to you? So start with students' perspectives. We know that that's always good, right? Starting with what students know. And their responses will vary depending on where they came from, what experiences they've had. And then work with students to analyze photos of peace, and not necessarily the kind of photos I just showed you, but pictures of peaceful situations. And so you might want to look at pictures of peace at a global level, or peace at a community level, or a personal level. And I'll show you some examples in a minute. But you're going to have students look at these photos and then elicit words from students about each photos by asking questions. So again, this is part of the critical thinking, like have students look at these photos and ask questions. And then you can go back to students' original thoughts about peace and be like, how does your ideas of peace match up to what these photos of peace in the world look like? So let me show you. I think it'll be easier if I show you an example. This is the thing. I don't want to show the, so yeah, so here are some photos, and unfortunately, I don't have the animations clicked on, so that all came up at once. I want you to think about, looking at these photos, what questions you can ask your students about these photos. And again, these are, we have the UN meeting of the UN, so this is a global example of peace, people working together on issues. Here we have some fireworks, which is, it's like an example of a celebration, a national celebration. So it's a national demonstration of peace. People are celebrating. We have a community, people working together. They're to develop a project, make a project. We have a family who are celebrating with each other. And then we have just one person in nature. And so think about how you can find peace in nature. And so these are 5 very different kinds of events, but they all have an underlying theme of peace. And so you can talk to students, ask them questions about these photos to elicit some language, to elicit words about these photos. And so I was going to have you type in the chat box about what questions you can ask, ideas for questions. Oh, some of you have. That's great. Okay. How would you feel attending the birthday celebration of your friend? Good. What is happiness? Yes. Yeah. Having students think about these. Yeah, I like that when you say the questions that ask students to think for them about their own, related to themselves. Like, how would you feel if you were in this situation? What links can you see between nature and peace? Oh, I like that one. But those are even more in-depth questions than the ones I have listed here. So the ones I had listed was like simply, what is happening in this photo? That might be a good question to ask students who are at a beginning level. You can just have them label different items in the photo and start there. Where is this taking place? Who are these people? How do they know each other? Why is this piece? What happened before this photo? Again, going back to like, what happened to get to this point? What do you think happened after this photo? So those are some questions you might ask. And then tying it to language, you can work with the words. So students will develop, from these photos, you might gather record a lot of different phrases and words connected to peace. And then you can manipulate these words, do different things with them. And so you can challenge students to connect them through what we call semantic webs, where they connect them with other kinds, similar words or antonyms or words that are different, and have them practice using those words. So that's one idea. My second idea is this comes from the English Teaching Forum magazine I was sharing with you. And this was an article written just in 2021. And so in this Forum magazine, there are often lesson plan ideas, and they're I'm going to briefly summarize with you this lesson plan or this idea. But if you want to find more, again, this is all available online for no charge at our website. So this idea was called Peacemakers Posters. And so what happens is students they start as we just started, discussing and defining what peace means and then what a peacemaker is. And then you can have your students read about peacemakers. So we talked about some: Martin Luther King, Gandhi, Mother Teresa. You might be thinking of peacemakers specific to your country or specific to Georgia. Those might be good examples for students to read about. So I'm talking about peacemakers, not the gun, not the Colt gun, but peacemakers, who are people who have achieved peace that we recognize today. And then I know I've seen in the chat critical thinking several times, but I really encourage you to have students to think critically, read about their whole life and think about what is good, what is the, what happened that was successful, but then what are the hard parts about this person's life? What are the sacrifices people had to make peace? What are the, sometimes they had to put their values in front of their personal, their personal well-being. And what did that look like? And so then the next step is that they read. So this is, the reading, all the 4 skills. So they're reading about the peacemakers, and then the goal is that they're going to create posters about a peacemaker. And so the next step is that they'll look at examples of posters. And so by this, I mean museum posters. I'll show you some examples. Here's one example. But when you go into a museum on exhibits, sometimes they will have a poster that will have images and then descriptions. And so you might have students look at different examples and then say, okay, now you choose a peacemaker. And then I want you to write about your peacemaker on a poster and a visual image. And so this is an example of one that was shown in the article about Rosa Parks. And she is a famous, she's known as a peacemaker in the United States because she also fought for, shouldn't use the word fought, but she worked for civil rights for African Americans. And again, this is an example of someone who made sacrifices and who made sacrifices that in her life to fight for this bigger cause. So that is another example. And then I know I have 1 minute, so I might go over just a couple minutes, but I'm gonna try to go quickly. And so then the final activity I was gonna share with you is, this is more general. So a final teaching tip is teaching students about the language they need to have discussions. So again, going back to how language teaching is powerful. By its very nature, language is interpersonal. So between, that means we use language with people. That's why we have language. So even in the solitary act of reading a book, we're technically interacting with people. And so the more we communicate with others, the more we talk with others, the more empathetic we become, the more we understand other people's point of view. And we know that empathy, or understanding others' perspectives, it helps prevent some of these hostile arguments and ignorance. And so when we're teaching language, we're not just teaching language, we're also teaching students how to have discussions. And one way we can do this is through having students practice having discussions in English. So English clubs, this is one way to practice not only English, but also this interpersonal communication. This one is, another resource we have that's very popular. It's called English Club Text and Materials. And so they have manuals. And in the manuals they have, if you have someone, or if you're trying to start up an English club, they have activities. So it's like units, and so discussion topics and questions to talk about. But the other thing this manual has is, I'm going to skip this for now, but the other thing this manual has is it has language that we need to use to have productive discussions. And so this is something that we can do, or that you can do with your students, not just before having a discussion. If we want a discussion to be productive, we can think about some of the words or the phrases that we use in academic English to move forward a discussion. And so these are screenshots from this guide, but you can see, like, if you want to convince someone, here's some phrases you might say that are, and these are phrases that are hostile, that are not hostile, and that also, help get your point across, help complete that function, help you convince someone, right? So you see the same thing: to agree, to disagree, to suggest. And so this is something that talking about this discussion language, I think is an important way to help students develop those speaking skills and then listening skills, helping students to respond and say, oh yes, I see what you're saying, or I am not sure I understand this point. Can you elaborate? Those are phrases that will help students move the conversation along so that there can be a productive conversation when there are disagreements. And so then I'm just going to end with a final photo. So I told you, I asked you what peace looked like in your mind, and I've been thinking a lot about peace. And I was talking the other day with someone, and it started getting depressing. I look at the world and I see a lot of violence and war, and I don't see a lot of peace. And so I started talking. Actually, I was talking to my sister, and we were ruminating about this, and she reminded me that my family is my family heritage is Irish. It's Irish Catholic. And so even though I was born in the United States and my parents were born in the United States, my heritage, my great-great-grandparents were born in Ireland. And this is a photo of the Irish border, the Irish border between Northern Ireland and Ireland. And this photo, I think, is from the 1970s, and this second one in color is from the 1980s. Not that long ago. And it reminded me of, like, yeah, it was very violent, like the Troubles. It was terrible. And it's upsetting, right? It's terrible to think about. But then I thought about today. I took a photo of what the border looks like today. And it looks like just a normal street or, just a border, like a street. And so this gives me a little bit of hope. Because this photo actually came from a news article about Brexit. And when Brexit happened a few years ago, there's all sorts of talk about how this might reignite the troubles, it might reignite the fighting. And it didn't. So we learned there were still lots of hard conversations. There were still lots of compromises and people who weren't happy. But we were able to work through that, and we're working through that, or Ireland and Northern Ireland, working through these issues without the violent fighting that we see in other places. And so this gives me a tiny bit of hope that it is possible, that conversation and discussion is possible. And then because we as language teachers, we can help students develop those skills to have those conversations that lead to peace. So I'm going to end there. Thank you for letting me go a few minutes over. And then this is my email address. And then this is our Relokiv, our email address for the region. So I can, if you have any questions, and email one of these emails, then we will get, either me or someone from my team will get back to you. So thank you so much. And again, thank you for inviting me to this conference, and enjoy the conference.
Lottie, thank you very much for bringing the issue that is so urgent today. It was very interesting and very interactive keynote. Thank you very much. And I would like to introduce another keynote speaker for the time being. Megan Morin. We talked about our professional ties with Northern Arizona University, and she's the best example. She's here as a keynote speaker, but also I would like to thank her for being supervisor of our PhD students in the program of education sciences. Thank you for your professional collaboration with us. The online floor is yours. Megan, please.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is most certainly mine. I just want to make sure that everyone's able to hear me first.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. So yeah, it is my honor to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you to the conference organizers. It's really a privilege to have an opportunity like this in which educators can come together and share thoughts and brainstorm ideas. So with that being said, let me go to my PowerPoint. Okay, and can everyone see this?
Yes.
Excellent. So my talk today is titled Going from Group Work Yuck to Group Work Yay, Helping Students Make the Most of Collaboration. And let me actually read you the abstract in case anyone hasn't had a chance to look at this, just so you know what you're getting into in the next 45 minutes or so. Often when group work is mentioned, a collective groan can be heard in the classroom. Students tend to dislike working with others, especially on graded projects, because they have had bad experiences in the past. Teachers usually group students for assignments without actually teaching the art of collaboration. In this presentation, I'm going to make the case that teachers have a great deal of power in creating productive and successful group dynamics, and they can do so with several easy to implement pre, during, and post activities, such as free writes, a group contract, self and peer evaluation forms. When group work is taught well, students recognize the power of collaboration. Even better, they produce a whole that is greater than the sum of its parts. And that's really what we want to get to, is that each student can produce something individually, but when they come together and they collaborate in an effective and an efficient way, they can really produce something that is greater than each of them could produce individually. So my motivation behind this topic, when I was asked to present at this conference, I thought long and hard about what I wanted to present on. And I knew that I would have a diverse audience of educators that teach everything from primary and secondary all the way to post-secondary education, as well as different content areas. And I wanted to make sure that my presentation was practical for everyone involved, that each of you could walk away with this with some ideas of how you could incorporate some of these ideas into your classroom. And so I came up with this idea of teaching collaboration in part because I was having a phone call with my mother about my cousin Kevin. And my cousin teaches as well. He teaches in the K-12 school system. And he was bemoaning the fact that his job wasn't going very well because he was doing this collaborative project and it wasn't working out well. And so the theme was sort of that students bemoan group work. And then that rubs off on teachers, and teachers begin to bemoan group work. And so my first question, as I was talking to my mother about this, was, well, did he teach his students how to collaborate? Because this is not a skill that comes naturally. This is something that has to be taught and scaffolded for students. So my disclaimer here is that even with the steps that I'm going to go over, it is quite possible that you will still not have 100% wonderful group cooperation. I teach a class, well, I teach 3 classes, and we do a major group project, which I'll talk more about in a minute. I have about 8 groups per class, so that's about 24 groups per semester. And inevitably, there's always one that seems to break down at least partway through the semester, despite what I do. So I can't guarantee that this will be a magic wand, but I do think that you'll find if you do group work with some of these steps, that you'll see much improvement. So the materials that I'm going to be showing you are from our university writing program, and you are welcome to adapt these as you wish. For the purposes of time, I probably won't go into them in the presentation, but Dr. Pipia does have access to them and hopefully can get you access as well. So I currently teach English 105, which is our first year college composition course. And one of the major projects that we do is the collaborative research project, in which students are grouped usually in groups of 3, and they have to come up with a modern problem that they investigate and then try to solve. And so the very first thing that I do in this is I show this working in groups video that I'd like to show you at least part of. So I'm actually going to stop my share for a second and share a different screen with you. And I want you to think as you're watching this about one particular aspect that resonates with you, and I'll have you write that in the chat. So just one second as I deal with technology here. Okay.
Is group work a thorn in your side? This video will equip you with the strategies you'll need to help your group be successful, leaving you anxiety-free about your next project. But why have strangers collaborated on projects? Research shows that we actually learn better and retain more information when we work with diverse perspectives. No matter what career you choose, some form of group work will be necessary, so starting now is great practice. So why are group projects sometimes a major headache? Even though it has led to great things, like Destiny's Child and the Rolling Stones. Yet still, most students don't do group work, but instead stitch the work of 4 to 5 different individuals together like it's Frankenstein's monster. The true purpose of group work is to use a range of perspectives to develop one polished and refined product. Now, let's focus on the early stages of group work. One of the biggest struggles students have with group work is managing the logistics of the project. Who's taking notes during the meeting? Who organizes meetings? Who will check in to see if tasks are completed? Before delving into the answers, have everyone share some bad habits that they want to improve on. For example, a tendency to be late or dominate a conversation. Basing these responsibilities on your answers will save you a lot of frustration down the road. We divided these responsibilities into roles like a note taker and a mediator. You can learn more by clicking the link in the description. Decide what works best for you and your group and allow room for flexibility in your roles. Up next is project planning. Before you end, make sure your group is on the same page when it comes to your purpose, goals, and approach for the project. Be specific with your tasks. Instead of shoot a video, break down the process into each of its steps. This will prevent potential conflicts, and the group can always refer back to this page if you've hit a roadblock. Make a chart with each task, the individual assigned to the task, its completion date, and necessary resources. Prioritize them based on time and importance, but be realistic and flexible with your deadlines. When assigning tasks and roles, assign them according to strength, but keep in mind that group work is a good opportunity to learn new skills. Aim for an equal number of hours when distributing tasks, and remember that some tasks may require more than one person. Also, make sure to schedule several check-ins so you can ensure that everyone stays on track and are better equipped to deal with setbacks. Another important part of group work is online collaboration. Online tools can promote efficiency and organization. However, many students go wrong by using it as a replacement for in-person group interaction. Think of a spectrum with complete democracy on one end and complete individualization on the other. There are certain things that work better when, for example, big group decisions like ideating and check-ins should be done in person. Maybe a subgroup where a few students work together on a big task and present back to the whole team is more appropriate. Items like deciding a font are probably better for online work. Decide what's appropriate for each task, but strive for in-person or video conferences as much as possible. Even though scheduling is a hassle, sometimes things that take 20 emails to figure out can easily occur in a 10-minute conversation. Here are some online tools we suggest for your own group work. However, it's easy to forget that not everyone has Facebook or can use these platforms. Exchange phone numbers and emails the old-fashioned way, especially in cases of emergency. If there's a gap in your group's communication, it's also handy to know how to manage conflict. Conflict of some magnitude is pretty much inevitable when you work with others. The way you handle it determines whether the different perspectives, personalities, and interests work to the team's advantage or its demise. Some examples of conflict you might face include a conflict of ideas, a lack of accountability, or missing deadlines. To stay on the right track, here are some tips on how to manage conflicts that may arise. Stay calm, be patient and respectful, and have each person speak one at a time. To avoid personal attacks, address the action, not the person. Instead of you always or you should, try I feel or I've noticed. If the issue gets personal, enlist the help of an objective party, like a TA or your prof. All relationships require compromise, so choose solutions that are in the group's best interests. Also, be sure to check out the links for specific strategies to help you with group process, managing conflict, and communicating effectively. In the end, what most people dislike about group work is the stress of managing it. By embracing the core idea of actually working in a group, you'll have the opportunity to identify your own strengths and weaknesses and soon learn firsthand what great groups can achieve. Want to be a better student? Explore the Learning Commons.
Okay, so I'd like you just to take a minute and to type into the chat anything that resonated with you about this video. It's important to know your audience. Timekeeping, good. Okay. So the next thing that I do in this unit is establish the importance of communication. And I used to do this by talking about how in the real world, we often co-author papers together. For example, in my own life, I have several times co-authored papers and done research with other people, colleagues. And I'd often see students' eyes sort of glazing over when I talked about that. And then this semester, I heard about a different example that is much more relatable to students. And that is with the example of Bridgerton. So I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with this show. This is a show on Netflix that has gained a lot of popularity. And I was listening to the radio and they were interviewing two women who created a musical based on the show Bridgerton. And this link actually goes to the news article, which if you're interested in it, I'll make sure that that's available to you after this. But these two young women in England created a musical based on Bridgerton. And as they did it, they live streamed their creative process. So they decided to write these songs and they were live streaming at the same time. And people from across the world were adding into the chat with suggestions and opinions on what they liked or what they thought didn't work well. So this was a truly collaborative effort on songwriting for this musical, which ended up winning several awards. And I thought that this was a very interesting, relevant, and real-world example of this that students could relate to much more than my own work. Once I have established this importance of group work, there's the issue of grouping. And there are several ways to set up groups. The first way, of course, is that the teacher chooses, and there are a few ways to do that. So a teacher might choose to group students based on a balance of grades, with having more proficient students in the same group as less proficient students. And the reason for that would be that ideally, the more proficient student serves as a model for the less proficient student, both in language and in student behavior, and helps to teach and pull up the lower proficient students. Now, of course, the drawback to that can be that the less proficient students might feel less confident with a more proficient student in their group. They might become reticent. They might tend to sit back and have the other students do more work. Or maybe a student or maybe a teacher groups students by grade. So all A's, for example, or all C's. And this has the complete opposite advantages and disadvantages, where there is no real model, role model, for example, in a group of lower proficiency students. but it does put the responsibility on each of them more equally, perhaps. Or a third way is what I like to call by passion for the course, and I'll give an example of that. I had a group one semester in which I had two very strong students, and one student who was an international student. English was not her first language, and she wasn't terribly proficient in English, but she was so invested in the course and so interested in it that it worked really well to group her with these higher proficiency students. Because she contributed a lot, she asked a lot of questions, she learned a lot from them, and she was able to really complement their group in a very unique way. So those are pretty much the three options for when a teacher groups students, or a teacher may choose to have students group themselves. And this is assuming or hoping that students have a level of maturity to pick people that they will work well with, instead of just their friends. Or the third way, and the way that I like best, is the hybrid approach. So I'll give a ticket out, which if you're not familiar with that, it's simply at the very end of the class period, I'll say, get out a scrap piece of paper and write your answer to this, and then you can hand it to me on the way out the door. And I give them the prompt, is there anyone you would particularly like to work with? And I'll say, I can't guarantee that I can group you with them, but I will take that into consideration. So then I use student preference and I combine it with my own ideas of who I think will work well together. Okay. The next thing that I do is establishing personal and group accountability. And so I'll have students do a free write, and I'll put on the board 4 questions. What are your strengths as a writer? What are your weaknesses as a writer? What are your strengths as a student? And what are your weaknesses as a student? And then I ask them to talk about their answers as a group. And I'll ask, how can knowing your partner's strengths and weaknesses help your group run more smoothly? And I'm going to have you think about that for a minute and maybe just drop that in the chat as well. Oh, a good question. Will anyone recognize weaknesses? Yes. Yes, I find that to be often the case. Sometimes they are more familiar with their weaknesses than their strengths, unfortunately. And so students will say things like, I am really awful at grammar, or I am really awful. A very common one is, I procrastinate all the time, right? As far as weaknesses as a student. And the reason that I have them reflect on this is not only to have them think about what they do well and what they could do better with, but also to share that in a group so that any potential gaps can be plugged. So for example, the student who says, I procrastinate all the time, maybe someone in their group says, oh, well, I actually work a lot, and so my schedule is really tight and I need to get things done early. So they can talk about that beforehand and potentially troubleshoot that issue and come up with a solution that works well for them, for both of those types of people, or for both of those people in the group. Same with the student who says, you know, I really struggle with grammar. Maybe someone else in the group says, oh, I love grammar. I feel really strongly about that. I'd love to help you with it. So by sharing these strengths and weaknesses, I hope that students are going to build on each other's strengths and help bring up each other's weaknesses. Let me move on for a moment. Okay. So the next thing that I do is have students complete a group contract. And each of these underlined words are links to these assignments. And again, you're welcome to use these. You're welcome to adapt them to your own contexts. And I do have them in a file folder as well. So the group contract is something that we do at the beginning of our unit before students even choose a topic. And our prompt asks students several questions, such as, what problems do you anticipate in your group? How do you hope to proactively solve those problems? What would you like your group name to be to help them establish some form of communal identity? When would you like to have things done by compared to the due date? Do you want it to be 24 hours before? Do you want it to be 6 hours before the due date? How will you get in touch with each other? And when do you expect a response back? So it asks several logistical questions to get them thinking about how their group dynamic will work and to help them proactively troubleshoot any issues that may arise. All the students must sign and date the contract, and then they keep a copy for themselves and they submit one to me. And that way, if there are any issues with the group, we can go back to the contract and see what was originally agreed upon before we go from there. Then we're getting into topic choice. So we've done a lot of setup already, and now we're ready to choose a topic. And we have found that giving students agency in their topic choice, if possible, can be really helpful. And we see this over and over again on post-writes. And post-writes are reflections that they do after their writing unit. And so, for example, students often write something like, I liked being able to choose our topic. In high school, we were always told what to write about, or we read something and then wrote about that. I was more invested in this because it interested me. So we'll find this level of engagement to be much higher when students can choose what they're writing about. That being said, students need guidelines such as a prompt with a specific genre. So this one, as I mentioned, is for our collaborative research project. It's a 6 to 8 page paper in which they have to use research from scholarly sources and other credible sources to investigate and possibly attempt to solve a problem, sort of depending on their topic. So after they have their prompt, they may need help with idea generation, and we do this in a couple different ways. One of the resources that we use is called problem-based learning scenarios, or PBLs. And this is an empirically based way to generate ideas for research papers in which a hypothetical situation is put forth about a hypothetical person that has several thorny issues that can be used as a springboard to help students figure out what they want their research question to be. Another way that I really like is I actually spend one entire class period and I bring several National Geographic magazines and I allow students to look through those. They can spend most of the class period just skimming through, seeing what interests them and taking it from there. The reason I like the National Geographic magazines is because they bring up so many different ideas. They could be environmentally based or political or social that students often haven't thought about before. So it encourages them to move outside of their comfort zone. And then lastly, once they have sort of an idea of a topic, a broad topic that interests them, they'll likely need to be taught what makes a good versus a poor topic. So I give them the choice of, or I put 3 up on the board. Well, the first one being, has the rate of DUIs, or driving under the influence, decreased with the rise of Uber and Lyft? The rise of infertility in the US, what are its causes and how does it affect families? And dinosaurs. And then I let them think about it and rate them from best to worst, and then talk with a partner about why they rated them that way. And then I'll talk about it as a full class, and I'll explain in which you could go with it as far as investigating its causes and its effect. There's also a lot of different sources that could be consulted, scholarly sources, as well as more public magazine articles, blogs, interviews, etc. The last one, this is actually an example taken from a group that I had that just came to me and they said, dinosaurs. We want our paper to be on dinosaurs. And I said, well, that's a good start, but it can't just be dinosaurs. Like, there are so many things involved in that. What do you mean? So together we narrowed it down, and they actually came up with a final research question that was, why should we study or why should we care about dinosaurs? And it ended up being a very successful paper, but it just needed a little bit of help and manipulation in narrowing it down a bit. So here you can see just an example of the National Geographic articles that I bring in and the different wide variety of topics that they explore. And so we're finally to the point of researching as a group. And the assignment that we give, the prompt that we give for this is an annotated bibliography, which if you're unfamiliar with it, it asks students to read sources of each. That includes a summary, it includes an evaluation of the credibility of the source, and it also includes a couple specific pieces of information that students want to use from that source in their paper. Those could be quotes, they could be statistics, they could be visuals, etc. So by asking them to do an annotated bibliography, it allows them to do several things. For ours, we ask them to have 10 sources. And what they often do is split that up amongst the group. So usually each student looks at 3 or 4 sources apiece. And this allows them to gather more research as a group than they could do individually. Instead of reading 10 or 12 sources, which can be very complex and long and difficult to read, they're concentrating more on just a few. So it's more quality over quantity. And they're able to get more than theoretically out of each of those sources. They also save time on research. They're able to get familiar with similar research without reading extensively. So once they have read their sources and their group members have also done the same, then they read each other's synopses. They can talk to each other about what the group members found in their own research and how it compared and contrasted with theirs. And that leads me to the last bullet point there. They can practice building on each other's knowledge, which is a really valuable skill. So now they're about at the stage of collaborative writing, and I aim to have a blend of instruction time, in-class work time, and then I encourage students to meet outside of class as well. And to do this, technology is their friend. With COVID-19, we've all gotten very familiar with Zoom. Google Docs is an amazing resource if students have access to it in order to write collaboratively, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And then just staying in communication through text and Snapchat and email is really important. We talk about maintaining good communication throughout the entire process to have a really smoothly running group. Okay, and then the Franken essay. So it's students' tendency to want to split up work and then go about their own separate ways, write their own pieces, and then plop it down into a final document at the end. We try to avoid that. So the goal, of course, is to avoid this Franken essay in which all these different pieces are stitched together, because there are often differences in tone, in formality, in writing style. Sometimes there's redundancy, sometimes there are gaps. So we want to avoid that. And instead, we want to have a cohesive work. And so one of the ways to do that is to emphasize working in one document. And that's where Google Docs comes into play again. And there are other ways to do that as well. But if students are working in one document, they're able to see what another student has written so as not to replicate it. They're able to be able to transition into their own sentences smoother. They're able to revise the entire document. And it starts to become their group paper instead of having singular parts. And that takes us to the second bullet point that says, reject the not my part mentality. So I'll have students at the beginning of this unit that say, oh, well, that's my part or that's not my part. And I'll try to erase that from their vocabulary and from their mindset. Because I explained that this paper is not just one person's part, but it's a group paper. And so I want them to embrace the ownership of the whole document. And this is for good and for bad. So if one thing in the paper is good, then they should all be taking credit for that. But if, for example, there's an issue of plagiarism, or there's something that I comment on that needs revision, I don't want a student to say, oh, well, that's not my part. Okay. Again, we embrace the ownership of the whole document. And one way that we get students to do this is by having them do a free write about revisions. And in the free write, for the prompt, I'll say, what's one way that you will work with another group member's contribution? How will you revise or work with someone to revise what they have written? So for example, maybe your group member wrote something about microplastics in the ocean, but they used a lot of first-person pronoun I. And you know that that's not particularly effective for a research paper. So you might talk to them about it and suggest possible ways to revise that. Once they have written the paper, then we do a couple of things at the very end of the unit to help reflect on it. And these are evaluations and post-writes. So at the end of the unit, as I mentioned, students will complete self and group evaluations. These are confidential, and they can either be on paper or online. So I have a link to a Google form, also a link to a paper version. And again, if you want access to any of these, they're free for you. And this is a debriefing session for students. It gives them some closure. They're allowed to write anything that happened in the group, in the dynamics of the group that they want the teacher to know about. And this allows teachers to see the group dynamics outside the classroom. So everything may have appeared fine within the classroom, but maybe outside there were some strange group dynamics that you were unaware of. And this allows students to be transparent about that. And then teachers can make adjustments to grades based on these evaluations. We've done this a couple different ways. In the past, we've been able to bump students up or down a little bit depending on the amount of effort that they put into their group. More recently, we've decided that if a student hasn't done 60% of what they were expected, their grade will drop down by one entire letter grade. So there are different ways to do that, but the evaluations may end up influencing the student's grade. And then students also complete reflections, and we call these post-writes. So in these, they reflect on or process the experience that they've had. And the goal is for them to apply what they've learned to future situations, whether that's future papers that they write or future groups that they're in or collaborative projects. Okay, let me just, okay. So the very last slide that I want to talk about is the importance of this on a more major scale. So going beyond just the assignment for class, why do we do group work? And so I want to go back to psychology in the 1950s when someone named L. Port wrote a book called The Nature of Prejudice. This has become very big in psychology and the social sciences. And in this book, he talked about intergroup contact. And his claim was that prejudice and conflict between groups can be reduced if members of the groups interact with each other. Now, this idea has been replicated literally hundreds of times since then by different researchers who have looked at different demographics and under different conditions. And what's been decided is that, yes, prejudice and conflict can be reduced, but only, or maybe especially, if certain conditions are met. And these are the conditions. So it has to be equal status, cooperative outcome, group cooperation, low intergroup anxiety, friendship potential, institutional support, and voluntary. Now, if you look at a group writing project similar to the collaborative research project that I've just talked about, students have equal status within the groups. There's a cooperative outcome, and that is the 6 to 8 page paper that they have to produce by the end of the unit. They have to have group cooperation to do that. As far as low intergroup anxiety, they are writing a paper for a grade. However, it is only one grade amongst several that they get in the course, so we hope that it's relatively low stakes. As far as friendship potential, this is a 3.5 to 4 week unit, and students often become close friends with their group mates. It does have institutional support, as it's a paper that they're required to do for class. I would say the only condition that it does not meet is that it's voluntary. It is mandated for the class. But we hope that not only are they producing a paper, but by coming together and working collaboratively, students are actually reducing prejudices between and among other students. So I sort of want to relate this back to Lottie's lovely presentation that we just saw about using language as a tool for peace. And I think that this is another way that we can do that. So with that, I'd like to end, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have. And you can either ask them now, or my email address is right here as well.
Thank you, Megan, for a very interesting keynote. I've already received some of the messages that people want to have the resources shared with them, and I will do this because you've already sent the resources to my email. Thank you very much. Now, a couple of technical things that I would like to have your attention to. So we are done with the first part of the keynote speeches, and now we will go to the parallel online sessions. We have 3 parallel online sessions, and then today we will finalize the conference with, again, 2 keynote speakers. Okay, so after 3 p.m., we'll have 2 keynote speakers. So room number 1 is this one. And the others who are participating in room 2 and 3, you can leave this room and join the other rooms. Okay, still we have 5 minutes so to arrange all the technical things.